Clay, we've made it to the end of yet another season of Deadwood. The second season, we're done. We're about to talk about the episode called Boy the Earth Talks To. I hope you're ready for it because I'm really excited to get into this one.
Well, my only reluctance, Wes, is that I have had such an onset of diarrhea. If the conversation is brief, I'm absolutely equal to the task.
Do you think both of those scenes had a character laugh in them? Were both of them breaks? Me and Amy were wondering about it. I think the second one, I think that Wolcott is not supposed to laugh, but he does in that scene.
Oh, really?
I don't know about Silas. I'm not sure if that's a scripted thing.
I like the second line more. The second line is amazing. He says, "Allow me a moment's silence, Mr. Hearst, sir. I'm having a digestive crisis. It must focus on repressing its expression." We all been there, EB.
This is it's quite an EB episode. We actually had a stomach bug go through the house over here a week ago, and I had diarrhea for 3 days, and it was like it was a weird stomach bug. Like it never took me out of the action, but I felt so ill for 3 days. And I never threw up or anything like that, but I just like my stomach was just I didn't eat for 3 days, and my stomach was in knots, and it's just like this is. So I related to EB Farnham.
It's been a while for a straight up stomach bug here. It's been a couple years.
Oh, okay, good.
Knocking on wood there. But,
the kids bring it with their dirty little hands and their dirty little fingers. But it's not fun. But I mean, normally the upside to the stomach stuff is that it goes away. Usually it's a day, right? You're like deathly ill for a day and then you get better after that. But this one was unique. I don't know. Felt terrible. I had to suppress.
You get to
this expression.
My favorite part is when you get to the point where you're just literally thinking, how can this keep happening?
Right.
Like
what's left in there?
What is there left in there to expunge?
It's just the Pedialyte you've been drinking. Just the sweet, sweet Pedialyte. This is Boy the Earth Talks To, and we're going to break it down right after this.
You're listening to a podcast that is a lie agreed upon. Join Wes and Clay as they discuss HBO's Deadwood and tell you something pretty.
The episode is called Boy the Earth Talks To. It is episode 12, the final episode of the second season of Deadwood, directed by Ed Bianchi, written by Ted Mann. In this one, Boy the Earth Talks To, Wu has Lee's henchmen murdered. Hearst arrives in Deadwood. Martha Bullock agrees to stay and teach the camp's children. Al offers Wu to Hearst, but Hearst waves the offer aside. Wu and Lee will fight for control of Chinatown. Farnham agrees to Hearst's offer of $100,000 for the hotel and a job as a manager. Jane is coerced into new clothes for Alma's wedding. Hearst confronts Wolcott about the murdered whores and ends their association. Al and Silas work over the Yankton agreement. Doherty, Adams, and Burns dressed as Chinese laborers and massacre Lee and his men. Tolliver ridicules Andy Cramed for bringing the plague of religion into town. Cramed stabs Cy in the gut. Deadwood celebrates the wedding with singing and dancing. Al watches the celebration from the balcony of the Gem. Standing below him in the thoroughfare, Wu cuts off his cue and declares Wu America. Wolcott hangs himself. Alma exchanges a last glance with Bullock and rides off with her husband, Ellsworth. All right, another season in the can. We are here to talk about Boy the Earth Talks To, which has a whole bunch of little hyphens in between the words. And so I was typing up all the show notes, Clay. What words are capitalized in a title like this? Do you capitalize the last word to in this one? Boy the Earth Talks To.
I would think so.
You apparently do. I don't know why though, because you don't capitalize the, and I thought that you needed to be like a noun or a verb to be capitalized in the title, but I guess not. Maybe it's because you
wouldn't capitalize the.
No, it's boy, lowercase the, then capital Earth, capital Talks, and capital
I see
To.
what you're saying.
Yeah, like a proper title. You know what I mean? Doesn't make any sense to me.
Wait, did you say lowercase talks or capital talks?
Capital Talks. So everything is capitalized except for the, but I'm surprised that to is also capitalized.
I think because
strange.
it would look insane if it was not capitalized.
That's fair. So this is Boy the Earth Talks To. Before I ask you your sort of general opinions, this is we talked about Farnham in the opening. This is a funny Farnham episode because I feel like I don't have any evidence that this was the case, but I feel like David Milch was just thinking in this one, like, what can I get this guy to do in this episode? And how can I end the season? He starts off with this weird diarrhea subplot. Then he has like multiple scenes of that. He does this very weird, high-pitched, isn't it time to start the ceremony thing when he's looking out the door.
That was very strange.
And then he pretends to perform cunnilingus on his new bag that's filled with money, which is his final thing that we see him do. But it's just a weird EB episode because he's just being continually humiliated throughout the entire thing by both the characters and the writers.
One more fucking day. That's all he had to control himself, and I could have put him in fucking business. Switch it. Shut the fuck up, Wool. At least he has an excuse. He's a chink. Who knows what the tribal requirements are? Maybe you don't act for a week. Maybe they exclude you from fucking dominoes or the like. But you, tipping our fucking business.
Sorry, Al.
You hold one chink off at gunpoint, bring him the fuck up here.
I'm sorry.
I'm so fucking pleased I trusted you, Johnny, to go out and buy meat. Get out of my fucking way. Tell Hearst I want to see him.
My only reluctance, Al, I have had such an onset of diarrhea.
E.B.
If the conversation's brief, I'm absolutely equal to the task. What shall I invoke as your reason?
How about the fucking truth? The chink that attacked his chink has been captured by my employee. If it would please Mr. Hearst, I'd like a word with him before I decide what to do with the chink in my custody.
But you'd like it here.
Don't you be setting fucking terms, E.B. He's got reason enough to want the look around.
Fine, then.
Yeah, but at the same time, though, he's not feeling it because he's made out with $100,000. So, like, you know, he's very happy at the end of the episode.
Yeah.
Even when Hearst is taking a hammer to his beloved hotel.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, I'm surprised that he's not a bigger part. I don't know if he might get annoying if they tried to do more with him, but like they use him the perfect amount, which I know it's the perfect amount because I find myself thinking I wish they had more for him to do.
Yeah.
Because he's just A+ every time he's on screen.
I think his delivery of the first diarrhea line is just hysterical. It just comes out of nowhere, and like the other characters don't react to it. $100,000 is $3 million. It's slightly less than $3 million today. So,
Oh boy,
it is a payday for E.B. Farnham. So this
makes it that much more understandable when Al regrettably decides not to take the bribe.
Yeah. 50,000 doesn't. Yeah, I mean, yes, that's right. Do you mean because it seems like a little bit of money, but it actually turns out to be it's quite a bit of money in the context there. Yeah. So what'd you think about Boy the Earth Talks To?
I thought it was good. I think it did a good job of tying stuff up while also kind of laying tracks for stuff that's going to happen in the future. Like I don't know the backstory to how the show was being handled at the time, but this almost feels like it could have been a series finale.
Mm-hmm.
The way that it ends. Yeah, I liked. I was surprised that Hearst's arrival wasn't a bit more grandiose, I guess.
Yep.
He just sort of, like everybody else, just kind of shows up. For the way that they had been talking about him, I was expecting, Galactus to show up, but
yeah.
But it was it was good. I enjoyed it. I liked one of my favorite little details was when during the marriage scene, when they have their backs to the camera, Ellsworth is still futzing with the gloves, which I thought was a nice little touch.
Yeah, his lavender gloves. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's good because they don't. There's so much going on in the season, but it doesn't feel like they've left anything any real threads loose, and they've kind of wrapped it all up by spending just as much time as you would need on stuff. Like there's nothing. It's oddly. there's not a ton of cliffhanger element to it, or like it's not a traditional finale where it's like racing to a conclusion.
Yeah.
The big concluding scene is just the marriage, the wedding.
Yeah. With a lot of doing another one of the Godfather things of intercutting everything else that's going on along with it.
Yeah. To the point where I kind of felt like Cy getting stabbed was a little much. I don't know if they necessarily needed that, but I get why they did it. But
yep. There's actually a production reason for Cy being stabbed. So
David Milch fucking hated the fact that Powers Booth didn't have a knife wound in his stomach.
The producers and other actors were having a hard time with Powers Booth at this point, and he was proving to be difficult. And so the decision was made to basically end it this way so they could have they'd be able to basically hold it in Powers Booth's face and say, like, if you'd like to come back, you can come back, but you have to behave. Otherwise, we're just going to say that you died during the break.
We did it to Ricky Jay. You don't think we can do it to you?
Go sit the fuck down. So, yeah, I mean, apparently he was... The whole backstory of Booth is that apparently he was just like... the show was in 2005, and he still had a Hollywood... I don't know if we talked about this before. According to the Deadwood Bible, he had still a old-school Hollywood outlook, which is that TV was sort of beneath him as a film actor. And he was apparently very difficult in scenes with people, like a very competitive actor who, for such a ensemble show, was very obsessed with whether or not he was coming out on top in scenes and his performance
much like
relative
Cy
to other people.
Tolliver himself.
Basically, yeah. So it ties into your thing about Powers Booth. Cy Tolliver's just Powers Booth dressed up like he's wearing clothing from the 1870s and just allowed to walk around on the soundstage. But that's it. So they basically did it. I think it fits storyline wise, but they did it as a way to sort of see if they could rein in his ego a little bit coming into the third season. He does return in the third season, so they didn't have to do it.
Yeah, this show continues to be one that I've never seen. I don't know if I've seen a show that has so blatantly had its behind the scenes stuff play out on screen the way this has.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that comes down to just the total control that Milch has over everything.
Yeah, and I think that he takes a lot of stuff that's happening and mixes it into the storyline that he's doing. Like he sort of synthesizes the stuff that's going on and makes it a part of. In that way, his writing is sort of therapeutic for him. Like he puts into the show what he's kind of thinking about or what's stressing him out. Because Kristen Bell is the other earlier example of this, of just being annoyed with her decision as an actress and a real person. He's just like, I'm going to fucking kill this character off because this is annoying to me.
Yeah, it's a weird kind of god power.
Yes.
To play with, where I don't like you, so I will kill you.
It's
Even
Milch.
if you are a child, I will kill you. Like God himself, I spare no one.
That's you imagine Milch is like Cy Tolliver sort of pretending to talk to God, right? As all this is going on when he's talking to Hearst. I think Hearst is a good place to start here, I suppose.
I will say the only thing that I was a little bit again, I feel like this is knowing how this show was created and how the writing process worked. It doesn't really surprise me that much, but just watching it, it feels like the rivalry between Wu and Lee feels like one of those things where I don't know, let's just end this. It never really got off the ground. Nothing really happened with it. So it was, when it ended, it just felt like another one of those things, like the Isringhausen thing, where it's like, we don't really know what to do with this, so let's just move on.
Although the plot thread everyone was waiting for, Al gives to Alma the bribe he took from Miss Isringhausen as a wedding gift.
Oh, is that what that was?
Yeah, when he throws the envelope down. Yeah. So
I was expecting it to be some letter saying I killed your husband or something.
JK. No, it's the bribe from Miss Isringhausen.
That's nice.
I mean, the Wu and that stuff really just serves as a kind of an ancillary thing to Hearst arriving. And
Sure.
Like obviously Wu can't speak a lot of English, so you're not going to have Milchian dialogue scenes between the two of them because it's not really something that they can do for those two characters.
Yeah.
But they certainly don't. They get a lot more screen time than they actually end up feeling like they need to, if that makes sense. And I wouldn't even say they get a lot of screen time, but they're just there as a kind of reminder that this is what's happening. Although I think that it does tie into Hearst with what happens in the episode, because you were, I think Hearst is a good place to start his end. He finally shows up in this one. He shows up in the final episode of the second season. You had mentioned he arrives to no fanfare, which he doesn't. He gets out of his carriage and he stretches his back. His back is sore from riding on the wagon the whole way over there. Hearst is one of my favorite antagonists in any medium. You get a little taste of him here. We're going to get much more, and so maybe I'll probably save a lot about what I want to talk about with him. But I think that he is... what I like about his appearance in this episode is that the first time I watched the show, I really remembered thinking, oh, Hearst is kind of a nice guy for the first little bit. Like he seems kind of like pleasant, because they set him up in such a way that all of the bad news that is told to him, he reacts kind of shocked and startled and upset that it has happened. So for instance, like learning that Lee has been burning the prostitutes, he gets like upset by it because he asks Swearingen like what bodies, who's burning. And the other thing is learning from Wolcott what has happened with killing the whores, and he reacts badly to that. Ultimately, it's just the show kind of playing with you, because it's revealed that the only reason he really cares is because he thinks these things are going to impact his ability to secure the color, as he calls it. So it's completely selfish why he's acting that way. But I do remember feeling tricked as to like, oh, Hearst isn't as bad a guy as everyone's been making it out to be, which is kind of interesting, but it's not the case, because I think by the end of it, he's more revealed to be like what his true character is when he has this conversation with Tolliver and when he buys the hotel and things like that. But what are your first impressions of Mr. Hearst?
Yeah, I thought he pretty immediately presents himself as someone who's on a completely different level from everybody else in the town. Like he has a level of excuse me, inflappability that's only being obscenely wealthy can buy you.
Yes. He's confident.
Yeah, he's very confident, and you know, the stuff that he is told, a lot of it he just sort of like he brushes up. Like when Cy tries to give him the backwards eloquent blackmail speech, he just kind of like goes, okay. And then he just kind of walks in. Like Tolliver's expecting this shit that works on everybody in this town to work on him, and it doesn't work on him. Yeah. You know.
Full and final payment, Mr. Tolliver, for what service you conceive you rendered me.
The Lord himself would testify to me having served you, Mr. Hearst. And what should be my just reward? Is that the cocksucker addressing us from the fucking whirlwind? George Hearst, Cy's just reward. Every claim he helped you by, he's in for 5%. Cy, as I'll sometimes be busy elsewhere, take your own fucking precautions, you're fairly treated. Should George try to fuck you, Wolcott's letter gets broad circulation.
Tell me what letter you mean.
George asks, what letter you refer to, Lord? That you, Cy, before you disposed of them whores, made that murdering geologist right once he told you George knew of his habits. Disturb you being in the public eye. Some don't mind. Fuck, some men like it. But I wonder if you're among them.
Stop moving your hands, sir. I mean you no harm, but I can't speak for Captain Turner.
Put your hand down, Cy. I hear you, Lord. Press being sold out cunts hardly matters that a story's true. But one like this, that is, sporting a man like you, a fucked up geologist and whores dug up from shallow graves with their throats slit from ear to ear, the same to their poor privates. What's that, Lord? Would you, Lord? Dirty-minded cocksucker. He says he'd found a story like that himself. 5%. Your interest seen to by one that controls his appetites.
And I think you know, the stuff with the hotel. I think he establishes himself pretty quickly as someone who is just playing a different game than anybody who is in this town. Because like everybody in the town is, even the people who consider themselves the most wizened to the game, don't really have like a singular goal in mind. You know, for as smart and as cunning as Al is, he's kind of all over the place as far as like what he wants, because Al is concerned with the town, you know, so he's concerned with all the strings, whereas Hearst is concerned with one string, and all of the other strings he couldn't care less about what happens to them or if they, you know, exist, as long as it doesn't impede his single string that he's interested in. Yeah. I'm sure there's a sweater metaphor in there somewhere, but and so it's interesting to have someone like that roll into town, where it's, you know, it's like when you have someone when you have like a small community that gets all wrapped up in personal gossip and the bubble of just being a small group of people, and then you have someone from the outside come in, and it immediately becomes apparent how stupid all that shit is. Yep, right. That's kind of the vibe he has rolling into town, I think.
Yeah, I like. I think those are all good, accurate points about Hearst. I think that he's certainly portrayed as a man who is used to getting what he wants and is not particularly concerned about things. He does that with his conversation with Tolliver. He does it with Wolcott. He is, as you're saying, like his solution to problems, and even he vocalizes it to Al in that first scene where they talk in Al's room, is that like he has no loyalty to anything that will prevent him from being able to get more gold, which he calls the color, which I think is a nice callback to the very first episode where Bullock says that people are going to hang under color of law, which is the show always sort of like abstracting that idea. And for Hearst, it's the abstraction of money and wealth, and the way that Seth was abstracting like perception of things. Hearst is... Your fanfare thing is interesting, because what's interesting to me about Hearst is he does not... The way that they talked about him, right, is being this sort of like wealthy billionaire who's coming in, right? I sort of see your fanfare comment about that. Hearst does not look wealthy in the show, right? Like he doesn't dress and he doesn't act wealthy, and he dresses like pretty much everyone else. And I'm assuming this, like his clothes look the same. I'm assuming he's not wearing like the finest clothing. Maybe I'm getting that wrong about the era of clothes that he's wearing, and this is supposed to be really expensive. But to me, Tolliver actually dresses more expensive than Hearst does. Yeah, and Hearst's interesting to me because Milch had a description of him as that Hearst has like abstracted gold to the point where it's no longer a real thing to him. It's just an idea and a concept that he's pursuing. And what Hearst kind of reminds me of is there's like this like the financial independence movement, which is like the FIRE movement to get financially independent and to retire early, which is that like if people who have high incomes save a tremendous amount of their income, like 70, 80, 90% of your gross, and you invest it and you do that for a couple decades, you're going to be able to retire early because you'll be able to live off your investment. And the problem with the movement is usually just that once you get into this mindset of just saving and like gamifying, and just like the money no longer means anything. It's just like the game of saving, this abstract notion of getting points is something to you.
Yeah, it's the Ebenezer Scrooge method of collecting wealth.
Yeah, basically. And when you get to the point where you have to spend it a lot of people struggle at that point because they've lived their whole life trying to get to that point without really figuring out what they're going to do once they get there. Mm-hmm. Hearst represents that to me. He's all consuming. He doesn't even care about what the wealth and what the money can do for him. It's more just the fact that he wants it. And he's
an action figure collector.
Yeah, he's running out of shelf space, but he's doing it. He
needs to get all of the Gundams that are in Deadwood.
Paint each one a different color. But he stands in contrast to other villains who I feel like in other movies and shows, when the rich guy shows up, there's like a gratuitousness to his wealth. And Hearst is not that way. And I think that that's a really neat character point, is that he is intentionally written as a way is that he's only obsessed with getting the thing, not what the thing can really do for him. And the things that it does for him are only done in service of getting more of the thing that he wants. And I just think he's a great character. I like his scene where when the wedding is going on, he has bought the hotel and he stands up with that sledgehammer and just starts literally destroying everything that everyone else is building around him as he's knocking down the walls. And we'll get more into Hearst as time goes on, but those are the things that I find most interesting about him. And I think that he's going to be a different villain from Wolcott in that his conversations with people are much more antagonistic and threatening than Wolcott's managed to be. He's a little bit more... Wolcott's flowery and interesting in how he talks, but there's something about the way that Hearst talks to people is neat to me and fascinating, and it makes me enjoy him.
Well, he's kind of the opposite of Wolcott, right? Because Wolcott presents himself as being this, finely dressed, finely mannered person who's secretly a psychopath. And Hearst is the opposite of that, who presents himself as a man of the minds.
Yes.
Who is actually a obscenely wealthy psychopath.
Yes. At least Hearst admits in this one, he prefers to go to wild... He doesn't like people, is the implication. He said he has that line, he prefers to go to like wild places where the gold can be found, but if he has to go to somewhere where there are people, he would prefer not to upset anybody. So he is a different kind of psychopath, but I find his... I think the idea of making him so singularly obsessed, and he's very theatrically obsessed, like the metaphor of him tearing down the walls and sitting in this like shitty apartment that he's basically just blown the walls out of as his home base is unique. And he's not staying in the hotel. He's not staying in the fanciest room. He's not, ordering Farnham around, really. He just wants to be left alone, and he wants to have his own domain and his own dominion over everything.
My question is, unrelated to that specifically, who is Garrett Dillahunt going to play next season?
He'll become Captain Turner. He'll play.
Is he playing Indian Chief or something?
He is in the finale.
Is he really?
He's in the movie. He's in the movie.
Oh, of course. All right, that's interesting.
Yeah. But yeah, that's it about Hearst. Any particular Hearst scenes stick out to you as something that you enjoyed? He has a bunch because he interacts with a lot of people in this one.
I like that first scene with Al. That whole sequence, even him, like everything from him coming into the bar and going up into the room was great. Like the way that, I forget what EB says when he's like, "I'll leave you to it then," and then they kind of walk away. He's like, "Unless you'd rather I join you." Yeah.
No one answers.
And then when they're going, go ahead.
Hey, when he introduces Al, he's like, "This is Al Swearingen," and Hearst just goes, "Yes, I see that."
But they have that good bit too, where I forget what the exact line is, but he asks Al, he's like, "Did you shoot this guy?" And he's like, "Which one?" It's like the animal. He's like, "Oh,
yeah, your kill."
No, yeah. That was really good. I like the bit where they're going up the stairs and his back hurts, and Al, I'm sure on purpose, makes it a point to just like jog up the stairs in front of him.
He runs ahead of him. Oh, it commiserates over his prostate. With
he
him
does,
too.
yeah. But the whole scene, their first scene in the office was really good. I thought I think they do a great job of establishing him right away as, like a different.
You'd expect him to kill Wu, wouldn't you? I think that's the initial surprise to me, is that he does not kill Wu when he could have,
I think with these balcony doors open, you'd get a little cross-draft in the summer.
I do indeed.
I've spent the last summers in Mexico.
Oh, that fucking heat must be oppressive.
Oh.
Nevada's was drier, I'd expect.
Have you been there?
Mine further was Australia. Wasted 2 years that was. Yeah, come in. Here we are. This yellow monkey's Wu.
Older fella. Not often you can tell how old they are.
Done a turn or two for me, Wu has, and well-liked enough among his own. His display against your chink was my first fucking inkling that he's irrational.
Mr. Lee, the man he tried to kill, has worked well for me in several camps.
And God bless Lee and up with fucking Wu's head. You got your finger on the cause of it, too. Your chink being forward-looking. Set the bodies ablaze now with the day's trade, this one being longer in the tooth.
Set what bodies ablaze?
Custom holds stronger to what passes for his mind.
What bodies, Mr. Swearingen?
The whores for your workers. Not only does burning the corpses save cargo space, far as the transporting of their bones back to the homeland, which, as I gather, they hold as their big fucking chance of the afterlife. What a tremendous tactic, terrifying the unburned ear.
You know prospecting, Mr. Swearingen?
Fucking nothing of it.
And the securing of the color once found?
Not a fucking thing.
All I really care about.
No, I fucking hope so. I'd hate to think you're this good at something that's only a fucking hobby.
Most often, my finds are in wild places, which I prefer. When that is not so, I want friendly relations with my predecessors so that I can secure the color undistracted.
When I said, there's no bombast or nothing big about his arrival, I actually meant like from a filmmaking standpoint more than like what he looks like. And, I wasn't expecting the Prince Ali sequence from Aladdin or anything, but I just like the way that he enters the town is very, for lack of a better term, boring. Like they don't do any sort of,
could just be a random guy the way that they shoot it.
Yeah. They don't do any like dramatic camera movements or anything to like reveal him or anything like that. Or there's no tension to his arrival. He's just like, boom, first thing, it's him getting out of the thing. And, he just looks like a guy. Which I think is probably on purpose. I mean, it was definitely on purpose, but like there's the way that they present him as a character. It seems that it is definitely meant for him to have this outward facing, man of the wilderness or kind of thing that is contrasting with his the actual richness of who he is.
Yeah. Because I wouldn't say I would expect like a Prince Ali entrance, but he really doesn't come with anybody besides Captain Turner, who's his bodyguard in this. But it's like there's, when the army showed up, you're kind of, the way that they talk about Hearst, you're kind of expecting him to come with like an army of Pinkertons or something into it. Sure. But his, I think it's an intentional choice just in the fact that Hearst's confidence is off the charts, really. Like to me, Hearst is Hearst is kind of an interesting foil that sits somewhere in this trifecta of Tolliver, Swearingen, and Hearst. They're like three semi-different versions of the same character. And I thought that, in this episode, I just remembered Wolcott's last line about Tolliver in the previous episode, which is that you're a desperate man, Tolliver, like you can feel things slipping away from you. And Cy is definitely feels like things are slipping away from him. So he's making this kind of desperate attempt to regain control of the situation. But I think that it's what we talked about earlier. Cy is incredibly insecure with himself, like in terms of his relationships and his business and the way that he presents himself, where Hearst is exactly the opposite, which is this quiet confidence type thing. And he's not as, in relation to Swearingen, he kind of does the opposite of what Swearingen did to like someone like Persimmon Phil, which is that Swearingen in the first season used to let everyone do the talking until they hung themselves. And in this one, it's interesting. In that first conversation, Swearingen is doing all the talking, right? Like Hearst is very much the playing the I'm in control of this and I'll let you talk until you tell me something. So I think that they all circle each other as like variations of the same kind of character, but they all have different pluses and minuses compared to each other.
Yeah, I think Al also is he's aware of what he's doing though, because I mean his whole thing an episode or two ago, whenever it was how to basically present a certain perception of himself to Hearst that doesn't give away the whole game, you know?
Right. Yeah.
So I could see him over talking on purpose to kind of like, I don't know, maybe I'm thinking too many layers of chess going on here, but
yeah, he's certainly because Al is intentionally trying to give up Wu, so it's kind of a surprise to him that backfires. It's a pleasant surprise, but it is something that he was prepared to do. Yeah, they are. They are. Al is in the midst of trying to pull everything together because I guess the other thing that's going on is that there's a lot of wedding and divorce symbolism in this one. There's literally the wedding that's going on, but everything else is the signing of Deadwood over to Yankton, which is all the Jerry scenes. This is my favorite Jerry episode, I think. I think he's very funny in this one.
yes.
He's so desperate to close the deal.
Next thing you hear will be your own voice. Get the fuck out.
Get the fuck out. Stoic composure.
Yeah.
And when Al calls him over and he like runs like a little child through the thoroughfare to get over to see what he's talking about. And there's a lot of good bits about Jerry has like no power to push back on, so he keeps saying like, I won't sign this, and Al just pushes the paper back to him and he looks at it again and then signs it. There's no he has no ability, but it is kind of another marriage symbolism about the town being absorbed.
That was the one thing I wasn't totally tracking where that ended up. So can you explain to me where things are in that regard?
Yeah, so they've agreed to be annexed by the Dakota territory, which is what Jerry is from.
Okay.
They've given up on the money because they don't want it to look like there's a bribe that's going on, but they've been accommodated in the other thing that they want to get, which is that they're going to be able to hold elections. And that's what that Al and Silas scene is about, where they're sort of negotiating that someone who runs for an election in the area has to live there, and they can't just be these ringers who are brought in by Yankton.
Right.
So they're trying to become legitimate, and they feel that they put themselves in a good position through this power play with Yankton, where they've gotten what they want out of this, and now they're going to be able to sort of exploit the government coming in to take over the camp.
Gotcha. I did think it was interesting. I mean, only having to live there for 2 weeks—that's not
that was
really
short.
much of a commitment.
No, that's if you'd have to be really under the gun to just get there and show up and say, I'm going to run for an election. I've been here for 3 days, and I think that I could be the mayor. I was surprised.
That's what Dr. Oz did, basically, right?
Yeah, in Pennsylvania, I think.
Yeah.
Do you even? I'm hazy because we have in our local election, the person that I vote in my district doesn't live in the district, which me and Amy were surprised about. We thought you had to, but I guess you don't have to. I don't know. It's all parlor games, smoke and mirrors, as they say.
Yeah, no idea how that stuff works. I just see the name. I just see the numbers in my bank account, how much they've added to it.
I see the butterfly ballot, and I mistakenly vote for the wrong person, and I pass it in.
I fold it in half, and then I poke through it with a pencil. And wherever the holes end up, that's who I'm voting for.
I always have the weird reaction that is obviously voting is important, but obviously your vote doesn't count really in the same way. Like you're never going to swing an election with your one vote. But it's always funny you go in and you're like, democracy in action, and then you look at like the newspaper results the next morning, and your vote is 30,000 votes in the wrong direction, and you're like, well, I tried my best.
Hey, well, it could have been 29,999. But you made a difference in that sense.
It's what Cy says. All the newspaper men are all bought out cunts anyway, so I can't trust what they're telling me. Anything else about the other marriages going on, or there's the divorce of Wolcott and Hearst. I guess when you talk about that, I love that scene between those two, where Wolcott is fired by Hearst. Did you have any thoughts about that one?
I like that scene because when he was like, when were you going to tell me about this shit? He was like, well, I did have you write that letter that you chose not to ask what it was about.
The Jefe de Policia.
So it's kind of your fault.
You should have. As someone who works for people who just sign letters that they need to do, I completely understand what Hearst just got that letter and he signed it and didn't read what was actually going on. But yeah, we learned that the episode of the title gets its name from that scene, which is that the Native Americans that Hearst interacted with at a previous gold find called him the boy that the earth talks to.
Is there... I always find that stuff really funny because I can't imagine there being like a bigger ego stroke that in reality doesn't really mean anything than being a guy like Hearst who's like, the Native Americans have a specific name for me. It's like, oh yeah, what the fuck is it, big guy?
Mm-hmm.
It's just like it's one of those things where like a guy like Hearst would definitely be like, this is a huge deal, and anybody else would be like, yeah, they have words, they get names for everybody.
Soar as high as an eagle. What would Wolcott's Indian name be? Boy who incel who needs his pants on, something like that. I like the symbolism of that scene. I like Wolcott sort of asking. He brings attention about like what the universe says to both of them. Hearst calls it nonsense, but it has to do with why does Hearst think that the earth talks to him? Hearst doesn't know. He doesn't ask why he's lucky. Well, Wolcott is sort of like, the earth tells me that there is no sin, which is his justification for the things that he's done. But it's another good scene between those two. I think that you get in that scene the entire reason for why Wolcott has been the way that he has been and why he kills himself at the end of the episode, just because without Hearst's protection, he really doesn't have anything for him at that point. And so off he goes towards the very end. I don't know if Wolcott finished as strongly. He might have had more to do if there was more Hearst scenes, but it's the end of an interesting character, at least with the end of Wolcott.
Yeah, he really went for it too. I feel like that was one of those. I felt like that was one of those hangings where anytime you hear about one of those in history, it's like, yeah, we really misjudged the distance, and his head came right off.
He does have a little bit of snap at the end, but that's what you want for a hanging.
He fell a long. Like, there's a whole science built into it, right? Like, there's a certain distance, and like the knot has to be. Anytime I hear about like, yeah, they hanged the guy. But they dropped him from too far a height, and the knot was off, and his head just like turned into jello. I feel like in reality, it just would have been like the top of a dandelion flying off.
Well, when you flick it with your thumb,
yeah,
yeah, it's the. I mean, he learned his lesson from Bullock in the first one, which when the guy was like, "That's not far enough a fall, I won't fucking die." Wolcott makes sure that he falls from a distance.
Which of those hangings was worse? The one where Bullock has to like pull on the guy's pants to break his neck?
That one's definitely worse.
That's got to be worse.
Yeah, I would rather fall from a great distance and break my neck, I think.
It's like when in The Simpsons when Mr. Burns is doing the Untouchables thing with the baseball bat, and he's just like gently hitting the guy in the back of the head, saying, "I'm giving you the beating of your life."
What are you doing to me? I'm giving you the beating of a lifetime. This was the first time I had always thought that Wolcott's death was a suicide. For whatever reason, I thought that there was a slight implication that Turner killed him in this one. I know that's not the case.
Yeah, I was thinking that. That isn't the case. Okay, I was wondering that too. If it was meant to imply that maybe it wasn't a suicide.
Yeah, no, I mean, because the only thing that I have for that is that his fall is so violent that it seems like he almost got pushed out or something.
Yeah.
But also that Turner walks in and sees his body, which I guess is the clue that it's not the case. Because they don't have Turner walk away from his body and leave or something, which would imply.
Right. I was trying to figure out where he jumped from.
Top of the barn, I guess.
I guess, yeah. And he looked so happy in that last scene when he's walking through the wedding, and then he Quasimodo's himself up to the bell tower and just hangs himself.
Knows what he has to do. Who's he writing his letter to?
I
don't actually know. I'm not sure who he's writing. If it's a suicide note or if it's a... Because he did not... Sai's lying about the letter, right? There is no letter from Wolcott.
Right. And Turner never finds out if there is. Right?
No, he never finds out. Yeah. So
These walls coming down.
They'll be your wall soon.
Ever since I was a child in Missouri, I've been down every hole I could find.
Boy the earth talks to.
Yeah, I've told you, that's what the Indians call me.
Yes.
Talks to you too, Francis, I know. Our time together, your hearing has stayed keen. But this gambler Tolliver, who was our agent for securing the claims, has spoken to me about you. He says that you've killed women, prostitutes. Yet he has disposed of the bodies for you. Well!
When I was in Campeche, you wrote a letter in my behalf.
To the Jefe de Policia.
I am aware of Mr. Wolcott's difficulty. You will find me personally grateful for any adjustments you may make in his case. What did you think that was about?
I didn't think about it. You were my agent in Mexico. You had many responsibilities. You asked me for the letter and I wrote it.
As when the earth talks to you, particularly, you never ask its reasons.
I don't need to know why I'm lucky.
What if the earth talks to us to get us to arrange its amusements?
Sounds like goddamn nonsense to me.
Suppose, to you, it whispers, "You are king over me, I exist to flesh your will."
Nonsense.
And to me, there is no sin.
The guy who plays Turner, is apparently a stunt double for someone in this.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So he was a stunt man who was doing it was for like Dan or something, or like a stand-in for Dan or something, and they cast him as this.
That's funny because I thought he looked familiar, but I guess not. I guess he's just got one of those character actor faces.
Yeah, he looks kind of like a bulky Mr. Monopoly or something to me.
I thought for a second it was the guy who played Mr. Belding on Saved by the Bell, who got like heavier as he got older.
He did, yeah, but he looks much worse. The Turner looks like he's well put together. Mr. Belding does not look in great shape, unfortunately.
Yeah.
The wedding happens. Anything else? What other scenes happen in this one? We learn about the blackmail threat. We've got Farnham, the wedding scenes. Alma struggles through the wedding, but they are officially married at this point.
Mm-hmm. The doctor teaches Mose Tai Chi or something.
Yeah, he teaches them to breathe in and breathe out.
Teaches them those exercises that they would do for 5 minutes in boot camp in like World War II, and they're like, "All right, you're good. Off to fight Jerry."
It's one of the rare episodes that doesn't take place the next day. This is a week or two after the previous episode, which has given Mose time to get better.
I loved the fact that he's still wearing the clothes he was shot in.
Yeah.
I don't know why I like that so much, but I was like, that's so fucking debasing or something.
Yeah.
I don't know what the word is, but like,
what
if
else
you're in
would
a
he
situation,
have?
I know. I was thinking it is realistic in that way, but I was thinking like, being in that situation, getting shot, almost dying, and then the only thing you have to wear are your own blood-stained clothes. That's pretty.
Yeah, I wonder if
dour.
He comes back in the third season. I wonder if he still wears the clothes all the time, because he's a pretty metaphorical character in that sense about like the reminder of what's happened to him and basically being reborn and given another chance to relive yourself. That's a little bit of his third season arc, but I mean, he's clearly a better person right away because he hasn't been a cunt to anybody after he's gotten shot. He speaks nicely to people. The wedding scene, they have another festivity. Like the wedding scene is a happy event, kind of like the bicycle ride from earlier in the season. It gives the whole town an ability to come together. It's the same thing that they've been doing.
Every one of these events where everybody comes together, somebody gets killed.
Yes, yeah. It's as the town is happily working together. Hearst is up there again, smashing the hotel down. There's the metaphor there is not particularly subtle, but it does work.
I did like the scene where at the beginning of the Tolliver and Hearst scene where he's looking at a hole that seems to be dug right in the middle of the street.
Yeah, the mine right there. Yeah,
is it in the town?
Yes, that's the one of the mines that Tolliver bought for him is just in the street, and
that's what I thought.
Yeah, Hearst says that it doesn't have any gold, so they can fill it back in.
I like that part because he's not really troubled by it, but immediately Tolliver's like, well, I mean, you did tell me to buy everything.
Yeah, right.
So this is not my fault that this doesn't have any gold in it.
3 hours in camp, going straight to exploring our vitals. Cy Tolliver, Mr. Hearst, has acted for your interest at one or several removes these last couple of months.
How do you do? Did you buy me this hole?
Off Marvin Soames, sir. Yes, I did.
She's out of color, boys. Let's fill her in.
I was told to act on all offers.
You did well, Mr. Tolliver. We want to be comprehensive.
And that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about that I really like. It's where it's like Tolliver is like so shifty and like adjusting and trying to make sure he comes out on top. And and he thinks this is a situation where like, oh, this could fuck me somehow. But as far as Hearst is concerned, he's like, nope, this one doesn't have anything. On to the next one. Like
yes.
He doesn't care.
Yeah. I even like it that Hearst is the one in the hole digging for the gold, you know?
Yeah.
It's not a guy who passes it up to him and he looks at the nugget through like his little monocle or something like that. Although it looked to me like he pulled out a huge chunk of gold and was hitting it with a hammer. But what do I know? Maybe
that was the last one. Maybe
Yeah.
he pocketed that one and then he went on his way.
Well, the Earth talked to him, told him there was no more gold right there. Yeah, and Cy tries to awkwardly sort of alert him to what's going on there, but Hearst escapes saying that he's tired and needs to rest. The wedding has gone off without a hitch. The ending of the wedding is a neat callback to Bullock and Alma make eye contact, and Swearingen up on his balcony just says, keep fucking walking, and then Bullock has to walk off.
I had to go back and put the subtitles on because I couldn't make out what Al said to him as he left when he was looking down. But
Yeah.
I like that because he says, go back to your house or something. And then he goes, it's to the right.
It's to the right. Yeah. Yeah. So that's, we talked about this in the last episode. You were wondering if there was closure. This is the closure. They make eye contact and Bullock walks away. That's the end. Yeah.
I'm still so fascinated by that. I mean, again, it's the difference between this show and the way this show is done and the way like I feel most other shows are handled, where it's so interesting to me that they have closed this off so relatively quickly. Because like even I mean, it was more or less done by the end of the beginning of the season.
Yep.
And they didn't really touch on it that much.
Yeah, because Martha
like
arrives in the first episode of the second
yeah,
season.
I mean, it was an underlying thing for Alma, which was really good, but like they never really even had scenes together much in the second season, if at all.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, I mean, again, I'm not saying this is one of those things that they just like, brushed off, but maybe it is, and it's the one where I feel like they probably made the right decision, because like how much, I'm thinking like the difference between this and a show, just like the traditional, like Cheers type thing, where it's like, well, these two kind of have a thing, so whenever we need to, we can always go back to the fact that these two are in love with each other, but that kind of stuff.
Yeah, right.
But here they make the decision to just end that and move on, the way they do a lot of storylines in the show, and sometimes that feels kind of truncated and weird, but in this case, I think it's good. I think it's the right decision.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm noticing the truncatedness of it. It's one of those things I just I almost, maybe unfairly or whatever, but I almost don't hold it against the show, weirdly. Like I appreciate the way that it was written and that some of the things just don't pan out very well. Like there are obvious examples, I think, where it's less interesting. There's going to be an example of that in the third season. The Isernhausen one is this example of this season where it's like, that probably wasn't really necessary. The Kirsten Bell story is kind of the same, although that one felt like it had at least a little bit of a characterization for like Tolliver and things like, and it inspires Joni to leave.
Yeah,
and
it
stuff.
affects Joni and what's his name, Ricky a lot.
Right? Yep.
Was that his name? Is that the character's name, Ricky?
Eddie Sawyer. Sorry,
Eddie.
Yep.
Eddie. Ricky
Eddie.
J. Yeah.
Eddie. Yeah,
I want to see a blooper reel or a supercut that's just Powers Booth saying people's names.
There's probably a supercut on YouTube of him saying people's names. I would definitely watch that. Fall asleep to it. Joni Stubbs. Yeah, I think that the Bullock has kind of just grown for the best. Like, this is a development that's best in the best interest of the camp, and that's kind of what Al represents at this point, or is what he's trying to achieve. And him talking to Al or Seth from the balcony, just saying like to move on with your life, and they both do, is a nice thing. But it's the other thing that everything sort of ties back around to is the other thing that I really enjoy from the show is this idea of like lies agreed upon, and sort of the cultural like institutions and agreements that we come to that are not necessarily honest in what they are. Like the marriage is the big example here, where Alma and Ellsworth's marriage is kind of that lie agreed upon, which is that it's not something based in love or anything. There's like a utility to it.
Well, the thing that's interesting there too is that it's a very similar kind of setup to Seth's marriage.
Yes,
but Seth's marriage seems to be
building,
going over the hump towards something more.
They're at least friendly
real.
At this point. Yeah. They hold hands in their morning scene. That is a hell of a thing. Was that morning back then? You just sat and stared at the wall all day for a couple of weeks.
I mean, if that's what morning is, that's what I do most of my day. That is a sad curtains drawn. Just looking at the back of the curtain. It would be great if she sat down next to him and had that whole speech, and then he's like, "I'm sorry, I was on Instagram. What did you say?"
he's playing Candy Crush on his phone. It's just a cutaway to him getting a new high score. And the thing of Yankton, those relationships, I agree with like the Martha and Bullock. Most of the marriages in this one are a little bit skewed. Really, there's a sense going on that the marriage is, that lie agreed upon thing, which is that none of them are completely on task. Because Alma has that overdub sequence where she's talking to Brahm, like she has the narrative, the voiceover where she's talking to Brahm about why she's staying. So I think that all the marriages are portrayed as that way.
But she never gets to it's the same kind of thing that Charlie says to Bill at Bill's grave, but she never makes it to the cemetery.
No, she just sees it from a distance and walks away. Yeah.
She sees it and she's like, it's close enough. It doesn't really make a difference. He's not going to hear it either way.
No, she doesn't really love him. She's just
give him a wave.
The only one that he can talk to, I guess. But she's in camp with Whitney Ellsworth, who's a good man, and she's also with the one she loves, as she says.
The other relationship that has a nice bookend is the season starts with Seth and Al beating the shit out of each other, and it ends with them shaking hands.
Yes. Yep. Bullock drinking in the gem, which he doesn't particularly do all the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
I liked Bullock shakes hands with Jerry and then immediately wipes his hand because Jerry's obviously very nervous about anything else here about that, or should we just talk about if you have any other thoughts? Otherwise, we can just talk about the season as a whole before we wrap it up. Sure. I guess. Did you have anything else, or is that it for notes?
The attack sequence was interesting when they put on those weird masks.
Yes, yeah. The foreshadowing last episode where he's like, "Can you guys fight in those Chinese dresses that they wear?"
Yeah. Those. I want to know where those masks came from. Were they special made? Is it just something that Wu had?
It's the most realistic Chinese face mask that's ever. Right. It's just a mesh strainer with a wispy mustache that you hang off of it. I was to
be fair, it's like only a step down from how they portrayed Asian people in the movies for the first 70 years of Hollywood.
I was going to say, in the dark, shot with a sort of action camera, it doesn't actually look that bad. They just look like they are in with the crowd of the other Chinese laborers who are in there. If the camera moves fast enough and you don't actually look at them. Dan Doherty says, "Don't you clap at me? Don't clap orders at me." But yeah, they take out Lee's gang. Because Wu now has the backing of Hearst, and they're able to do that. So I like Hearst has a very Lucille Bluth here, where he's like, "Oh, it's unusual. You can tell how old an Asian is, but look at this guy; he's old." Season 2. What'd you think of season 2 compared to season 1?
It's good. I think so. A friend of mine years ago, when I started watching this, I said I was going to start watching, and he said the first season's great, the second season and third season suck.
Yep.
And I was like, oh, okay. Well, it kind of like killed my buzz for watching the rest of the show because he said it wasn't very good.
Yeah.
And I think the thing is, it's not that season 2 is bad, because it's not. I think it's very good, but it is just so tonally different than the first season, because the first season has so much of that classic Western stuff in it.
Yeah.
And like the whole point of the second season is that they are trying to evolve past that. And so you start your season with a knockdown, drag out fist fight in the street, and it ends with document signing, basically. You know, it's so
business transactions, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you are expecting the same kind of energy and violence that you get in season 1, I can definitely see why you'd be disappointed by it. But what they're doing is a really, it's rare, I think, that you get a show that is about, the show's called Deadwood, right? So like, ostensibly the main character of the show is the city, is the town.
Yep.
And it's rare that you get a show like that where the character arc that you are seeing is that of the town.
Right.
They always say, well, Gotham City's like its own character. So whatever. You never see grand changes made to Gotham City.
Right. Architecturally, it represents things. Yeah, but I wouldn't say that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but here you're actually getting, like, it is a character in the show in that you are watching an arc of this character known as Deadwood. It's not like they're doing this on Cougar Town, Cougar Town. Maybe they did. I didn't watch Cougar Town. Maybe it's a brilliantly written character study of Cougar Town. But and I think that's really impressive, because I don't think that's very easy to do. And I don't think it's something. Do you think this show would have played on broadcast TV? Like, if this was a show that was on like CBS or something, do you think people would have watched like this?
No, besides the obvious thing that like it would be sort of totally different just from content standpoint.
Yeah. I'm taking away the limitations of that kind of stuff. Just like the kind of show that it is, the way that it's structured, the way things played out. Do you think it's something that only works on HBO at that time? Like, I feel like now you might be able to get away with something like this on more traditional channels, but I don't think in 2002 or whatever this was, I don't think I don't think FX really existed yet. I don't think you could have done this on Fox or something.
Right. No, I don't, but largely because I think that if you take away the HBO like adult content aspect of it, the show loses quite a bit at that point.
Sure.
Like, it doesn't really. It's not that the swears are everything, but there's like the language is evocative of what the town is doing, right? So it's like it's this developmental thing where like the language of the characters displays how the characters are, like their station in life. Like Merrick never curses, interestingly. Like the educated people are rarely cursing, but the people who are the laborers and the sort of like down in the dirt type people, or like the sort of the swearingen characters, use it almost like constantly. So it's I think if you took it and you put it on CBS, like losing the language and stuff like that would take away a tremendous amount, because as we've talked about, if they took it to CBS, all you really have at that point is kind of the plot, and the plot here is not the point in a lot of ways. Beyond the sort of like broad strokes of where things are going, the individual threads are kind of like the characters in that they all need to combine with each other. And I think on a CBS thing, if you don't have the language and you don't have the ability to get into the topics that they're talking about here, like the prostitution and the drugs and the murders and stuff like that, it's just, it doesn't, you're not going to have anything by the end of it, I don't think. Even if you adapted it and made it something more CBS friendly, I feel like it loses something there.
Well, I guess, like say that wasn't an issue, and so you could just present the show as whatever the CBS equivalent of that retains all of these things you're talking about.
Right. I think it's still yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think it is the kind of show that would have a big audience? Because I kind of don't think it would.
No, I don't think. Well, I guess my question to you: would it be critically acclaimed if this show was not on HBO?
I think it's possible.
Okay.
Because I mean, you think about something weird like Twin Peaks, right?
Yep.
Twin Peaks was a very unique show for the time that was pretty highly critically acclaimed, and it also had a huge fan base too. But I think that was driven so much by the mystery aspect of it that this doesn't have. I guess my thought process about asking that question is like, I think once you get to season 2, you don't have the same kind of driver that season 1 does.
Yep.
In a traditional sense. So it's like, it's like if I'm trying to use a Star Trek analogy, but I think all of the suggestions I'm going to make would be like, no, that would actually be better. Because I was going to say, it's like if Star Trek Discovery, the second season of Star Trek Discovery, was like just diplomacy stuff, and I was like, no, that would be better than the first season of Star Trek. But it's like that kind of thing where it's like, all right, okay, cool, Western show, gunfights, blah 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 blah, and then second season rolls around, and it's like drawing room parlor stuff and Yankton and the Pinkertons and kind of dense dialogue stuff. It's like,
what
okay,
is that? Saul says he's like Jones from Butte talking about that guy, and just like, what the fuck?
Yeah, like it's the kind of show that rewards paying attention, and I don't think it's the kind of show that would play very well if you didn't have that sort of HBO thing behind it, where the HBO-ness of it is, I think it still does, despite their attempts to destroy this, but I think the HBO name still carries weight to tell you what kind of show you're in for. Right?
Yeah, certainly at this time of the show as well.
Yeah. If this was a Max original, I don't know if people would go for it, but
nothing worse than these Max originals that I'm like, oh, this must have been on HBO, and it's like, oh no, this was definitely not on HBO. This is true crime churned out by an AI, I think.
Yeah, but it's that kind of thing where it's like, I feel like it requires a different kind of, and I don't mean this to sound like pretentious or anything, but it requires a different kind of attention to be paid to it.
Yeah. I don't think the show would have been a hit on broadcast television.
I don't think so.
No.
Yeah. I mean, well, it feels like, was it a hit on HBO?
Not at HBO either, really.
Yeah, because I think the third season is like short, right?
No, it's 12. It's a full.
Oh, it is.
Season.
Oh, for some reason I thought it got canceled like halfway through the season.
No, it's a full season. Yeah. This was the era HBO would finish their things. Like, they would still had that mindset of like the creators will finish things.
That was when they were like, every show that we do, we are committed, ratings regardless, to at least 5 seasons. And then it's like, well, did we say 5? We meant 3.
Yeah, it's a kind of a squiggle on that 5. It's actually a 3. It's just the ink smudged.
Again, I bring up Carnival, which I think we talked about before. That you didn't remember.
I've never
seen.
Right? No, I've seen maybe an episode or 2. I think the kids in college liked it, but I never watched the whole thing.
I think that was one where it was like, we here at HBO commit to our projects, and then after 2 seasons of that, we're like, we didn't say every project. This one is very expensive, so we're not going to do any more of this show.
We aren't allowing the creator to speak, but he's agreed that 2 seasons is the right amount for the show, and we will get rid of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think this would have been a hit on CBS, and I'm trying to avoid, it's not just the swearing and the cursing and stuff like that, but there's like the adult content-esque nature of it is sort of vital to what the show is talking about too. Like, I think if you PG the content of Deadwood on HBO, I think it would be a ridiculously boring CBS show, right?
Yeah.
Like the problem there is that it's not just all about like the tits and ass and the swearing of it that makes it a great show, but the dialogue, this dialogue talking like what would be a good storyline? Like there could not be a reality of the prostitutes in the CBS show, right? Like they would just be a choir of like Greek, the Greek chorus or something. Like the CBS show would just have incredibly well put together women who are just sort of pretending to be prostitutes, but you never actually see them do anything. They're just kind of in the background of stuff.
Sure.
I think that the grittiness of what HBO allows is very important to it. And I don't know, even with like the Milchian dialogue and the plots and the exact same themes, I don't know if it really works on a broadcast network at all. I'm not sure. I don't think it would be anything that would be gripping or fun, really.
Yeah. I would be curious to know. I know this is not a 1-to-1, but if any of our listeners are fans of Justified,
yeah,
I'd be curious to see how they would compare Justified to Deadwood. And I only say that because Timothy Oliphant is the main character.
Who wears a cowboy hat.
Yeah. Because I remember people love Justified. And I watched like the first 2 episodes and I was like, this ain't it. Like it just was not working for me. I think because I had been watching Deadwood.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh shit. Yeah. Timothy, absolutely. I'm in. And then it presents itself as this like modern Western, and then at some point in the first episode, someone blows up a convenience store with a rocket launcher, and I was like, all right, maybe this isn't for me. But
that's what you have to do when you're not allowed to use the full extent of language and character interactions like you are in this show, right? Like in Justified, they can't actually talk about anything interesting because it's kind of, you're either playing it for a broader audience or the content can't be PG-ified for it, so you end up with shit like a rocket launcher gets shot into an office building or something. But
and that's no strike against Justified.
No, it's
I
just
love
a different kind of show. Yeah,
as much as the next.
Right, depending on what you're hitting with it.
I like a rocket launcher as much as the next Insurgent, but
not in this show. But as you were saying, season 2 of this show.
That'd be a twist.
Season 2 of this show is just. I'll remember season 2 in comparison to season 1 feels to me like a lot of conversations by candlelight at night is how I would describe season 2 in a way that season 1 felt like it was a lot of fisticuffs in broad daylight outside. Yeah. And that's the difference between the two of them, I think.
What if in season 3 they knew that ratings were flailing, and so halfway through season 3, Hearst goes to his mine and discovers inside the mine is Amelia Earhart and some other
cocksucker.
Yeah, whoever else was in there with her in that Voyager episode.
We watched that Star Trek episode. We should know, but we don't. We can't remember. We can't remember Voyager episodes from 2 weeks ago. Which
I
season
I don't want people to think I'm coming down on Justified, but just because I know people love that show, and I'm
sure it's fine for what it is.
Yeah, I would give it a shot. I know I actually worked with a couple people who worked on Justified. Very nice people, great writers. So yeah, that's just me trying to save face
for insulting Justified
for in a career standpoint. A lot of great people working on that show. I'd love to work with all of them.
Justified is an FX show. It
is. Yeah,
it's. I mean, that's what it is. Sons of Anarchy was an FX show. I think Justified is better than Sons of Anarchy. I'll say that much.
Yeah, I think the FX shows in retrospect will be really interesting to dip back into, because like,
do you think they'll have lasting power?
Well, I was going to say Justified aside, because I hear it's great.
Yeah, great.
I
that
feel
railing
like,
guy, terrific.
Yeah, I feel like the FX shows are trying too hard to do what shows like Deadwood do very naturally. And so you end up with this weird over-the-top element that just feels phony.
Yeah.
Like I felt the same way about The Shield. I tried to watch The Shield, and it just got to a point where it was like, it was like watching a cop show written by teenagers who just found out that they could swear. And it was like, this is not the same to me as something like Deadwood, where it just feels more considered. You know, it just feels like it feels like shock value for the sake of shock value.
Yeah, yeah. It's even their comedies, I feel kind of that way. Like, I don't know if I watched a couple of the FX comedies as they were on, and I just don't know if they're shows that I would ever return to or stick with, really. Not that
I'll
they
go
were
to bat
bad
for It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. That
yeah,
show's
It's Always
amazing,
Sunny. I never got into it. There was some other one that was on for a while that was like, I'm not going to be able to remember it, but it had a bunch of couples in it. I can't remember, but it got... it was widely praised for a while. I don't think it still exists, but anyway, for this one, did you prefer season 1 or season 2? Season 2 has higher critical ratings on reviews.
I don't know. I think it's very difficult to compare them because they are so different.
What was the big improvement in season 2? If you didn't prefer season 2, what's one thing you would point at and say the show did this better?
I would say season 1 is a smoother watch.
Yeah,
because it has those high moments of action and more visceral stuff. Not that this one doesn't, but it's just not presented in the same kind of way. Most improved.
Season 1 feels a little bit more cohesive to me as a way through it. Like,
I would agree. Yeah. Like, because we talked about, this one has so many dangling plot threads.
Yes.
That just kind of come and go. Was the Kristen Bell thing was season 2, right?
No, that's season 1.
Oh, that's season 1?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The most improved. That's a good question. I think season 2 uses the ensemble a bit better than season 1 does.
Yeah.
Because they're focusing so much on establishing the big players, and season 2 lets them, everything's kind of, the four corners of the tent have been nailed down, and now they can let the elephants in.
Yeah. I think that the elephant's ass is against...
This my carnival is getting into my brain here.
I think that obviously it's something that a lot of shows do, but the character interactions feel a little bit more comfortable. There's a scene in this one I really love. I love it's pointless, but it's Tom Nuttall when he comes into the gym and he talks to Al about selling. I love that scene between the two of them. They have the it ends with we talked before that Al doesn't really have any friends. I think Tom Nuttall kind of qualifies to a friend for Al. Al seems to like him quite a bit.
Yeah.
And just the way that it ends with it, Tom is like, so did you ever think Ellsworth and Alma would get together? And Al just says, like, sometimes true love just finds each other, and they both laugh about it. But
I did also really like Al kind of watching what's going on from the balcony.
Yeah.
And talking about how he was invited, but he would never fucking go. Because part of me thinks he wants to go. He has to keep up this front of aloofness. But I think, much like the funeral episode where he's kind of like, hanging over the balcony trying to see what's going on. I think there's a part of him that does want to go.
Yes. Yeah. He does feel
even if he did kill her husband.
Yeah. And I guess that the point for Al at this point is to determine where he sits on the line of like altruistic for the town stuff and selfish desire, and he continues to balance between the two of them. Anything else about season 2 here? No, I like season. I remembered, as I've mentioned before, I did not like the first half of season 2. That was my memory coming into it. And I think I was wrong about that. I think it's good. It is, as you're saying, it's a different pace and a different thing that they're doing, where it's introducing Wolcott. It's sort of building up towards this unnamed Hearst threat that's looming in the background. The politicking on your first time through is kind of difficult to understand what the fuck anyone is talking about with a lot of the politics stuff. Once you get familiar with it, you realize that it's not really all that complicated, but it feels complicated in the way that they're talking about things. But I think a lot of the great lines of dialogue come from season 2. On a CBS show, you couldn't have Those Who Doubt Me Suck Cock by Choice. That would not quite have the same ring to it if it was coming out of Kevin. The fuck is that fat comedian's name?
Kevin James.
Kevin James. But yeah, I like season 2. I remember going into season 3 thinking that season 3 was better than season 2. But having read a lot of reviews, I'm prepared to adjust myself, and I can see why that's the case. But I love Hearst so much that it's hard to...
That's what the name of the show would be on CBS.
Yes. The big role for Gerald McRaney, who plays Hearst, is he's Major Dad from that sitcom.
I was going to say, I thought that was Major Dad.
Yeah, that's Major Dad. So it was a surprise casting, but we'll see if he gets into his sitcom roots.
I always get him mixed up with Dabney Coleman, who has a very similar look.
Similar face, yeah.
Bald with a big mustache.
Yeah. Yeah, so we'll see about season 3. But you haven't seen any of season 3, so it'll all be new
I have
to
not.
you. So we're looking forward to it. So that's it. Thanks, everybody, for listening. This is Boy the Earth Talks To, which is our final episode of the second season of Deadwood. We're just going to roll right into the next episode with the third season, so you guys can get ready for that. We're not going to take a break or anything. We'll just keep going and finish it off. It's Tell Your God to Ready for Blood is the next episode.
Ooh, that's a good title.
If you guys have enjoyed the content and you enjoyed...
It's like a Slayer album.
Dun, 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 dun. What do you think? Is Raining Blood a good song?
What's the criteria for...
I don't know. I'm every time
it's a fantastic title.
It is. Every time I listen to Raining Blood, maybe that's the thing about it, is it always feels like it's right about to fall apart on itself. And maybe that's the intent of it, but the
lyrics, Raining Blood from a lacerated sky, fucking great.
It is super metal. I have nothing against them at all, but I always wonder, that's their song, their famous song, obviously, but I don't know if it's if it would make me dive further into the Slayer discography.
Yeah, it's all kind of the same shit.
Yeah.
I find them to be one of those bands that's so fascinating. I think Pantera is another one where it's like 2 years before that they were just hairsprayed up glam metal guys, and then all of a sudden it was like, okay, we gotta pivot a bit here.
You gotta make that Texas swamp groove metal or whatever they called it. Yeah, that's
do you like Pantera? I never got into Pantera.
I love the sound of Pantera. I think that they sound...
I've never listened to the music, but I appreciate the fact that they're making it. Their production-wise, they said, like, I think that their drum sound is really great for metal of that era. I wouldn't say I'm crazy about Pantera. I remember always being scared of Pantera when I was growing up. I thought they were a very scary band, but I think they're reasonable. Like they're a pretty decent '90s band when all is said and done. Yeah,
This Love is a great song.
It always that change always reminds me of the other great one is Dr. Dre before he was in NWA.
Yes.
Was the name he got the name Dr. Dre because he dressed like a doctor on stage.
Yes, yeah, like a stethoscope.
Well, yeah, while he was doing like your mom can't cook rap,
Yep, yeah, Dr. Dre. It's the when you Pantera, learning that Pantera was a hair metal band is when you learn that everything after like 1992 was ghostwritten for Dr. Dre, and he wasn't even writing his own raps. It's just other people writing for him.
I guess I never thought about it, but yeah, it makes sense.
Makes sense. He's a busy man. He's got things to do.
The other one, another one of my favorites, Ronnie James Dio, originally a doo-wop singer.
Sure.
You go back, you can find some of his early stuff. Where I think his name was like Ronnie Dio or something. I don't know. It was something like that. Where he's doing like Four Seasons type stuff. It's really interesting. Yeah. I always wonder like when the switch came. When did Ronnie James Dio put down the hair gel and pick up the sword? You know what I mean?
Right. And how do you feel so confident switching like that? You know?
Right. Yeah.
I would have no confidence. That's the.
Michael Bolton did it the other way. He went from a metal guy into kind of a easy listening kind of guy.
Easy listening. Well, that makes sense because you age that way, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the way of getting older. But the other way is a choice. Anyway, support the show at patreon.com/thepensky if you guys have caught up or you're just listening for the first time. And maybe the podcast has even ended at this point because Clay has died or something. But
maybe the world has ended.
Maybe the world. Well, they'd have a hard time listening.
Maybe you found an iPod that still has juice.
And this episode is queued up on it.
The last thing that was on it.
Well, hopefully Patreon still exists.
I think it will.
Okay,
if the world gets wiped out by a nuclear holocaust, I think Patreon will still stand. I always wonder, we are far enough removed now that there's at least one generation of people who actively listen to podcasts that probably have no idea where the name comes from.
Yeah.
Because it was originally linked to the iPod.
Yeah. We're past the iPod existing at all, interestingly.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm very curious if how many of the modern era of podcast listeners, there might even be people who are like our age, who are big into podcasts that don't realize that's where the name comes from.
Well, it's one of these things too, like we've had this conversation on the Discord where I'm fairly strict about what I call a podcast, and apparently other people are not. Like YouTube is now said to be the number one destination for podcasts, right? And people will say, here's a podcast, and it's a video of two people having a conversation, right?
Right.
To me, I'm pretty anal about this. Like the podcast has to be an audio file that's delivered through like an RSS feed to your device, basically. Like it's not just a conversation. It's not like radio shows where two people had a conversation were not podcasts, in the 1950s. So I'm climbing a hill that doesn't need to. I don't need to die on this
What are
one.
we doing right now but a radio show where two people just have a conversation?
But we're delivering it through the internet on an RSS feed.
Right. Okay. I see what you're saying.
Yeah. So two people having a conversation that's recorded is not a podcast to me, because we've been doing that since the dawn of time. It's the mechanism for releasing it that makes it a podcast.
Yeah. I just find it fascinating that podcasts had existed for a number of years before anybody gave a shit.
Yeah, just tech nerds sharing audio files with each other.
By the time people cared, I think the iPod was mostly obsolete at that point.
I mean,
it's only been, let's say, we've been doing this for 8 years?
Yeah, we started when podcasts were still kind of novel, Yeah, the Trek show
starting to pick up.
They were starting to pick up, yeah.
But I mean, we say that, and even at that point, there were people who had been like, we've been doing a Star Trek podcast for
Star
7
Trek
years.
Podcast still existed. But when we started the Trek podcast, there was still a large chance that some people would be unfamiliar with what a podcast is at that point. It was a relatively new thing. Yeah.
I think with everything, it just got easier to do.
Yes.
There's just so...
To the downside of everyone.
Yeah. Now, the thing we take so seriously has become a joke. Of course you have a podcast.
Yeah.
Of course it's about Star Trek. I'm sorry. Would you like another politics podcast?
But how many listeners on Patreon do you have?
Let's talk about the deficit, Wes.
I'll just do a daily diary podcast, and I'll talk about how the other podcasts are going and let people know.
That would be, you've either made it or we need to shut the whole thing down when it's like we have a podcast that comes out once a week. That's like an aggregate.
Day. Yeah, an
aggregate of all of our podcasts that we put out.
It's me reading off numbers from the podcast site because I won't do a video podcast for it. I'll just read the numbers off of the site and record myself. All right, I guess we're done with Deadwood. Thanks, everybody. We're not done with Deadwood. We're done with the second season. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Patreon.com/ThePensky File if you want to support the show. That's the best way to do it. If the show's ended, all that stuff, Patreon still exists. You can go there and support the show and then just unsubscribe, if you've enjoyed this so far. We've given you 24 episodes of Deadwood goodness. Clay, do you have anything you want to say before we get out of here?
Check out the Rotten Horror Picture Show, where Amanda and I talk about horror movies. This month on Patreon, this year, we're doing Video Nasties. And this month, this being July, we did Mario Bava's Bay of Blood, which has the alternate title, Twitch of the Death Nerve, which is one of the best titles I've ever heard. I don't know why they didn't use that everywhere. And also the Badass Podcast, where myself and Sean Murphy talk about Batman the Animated Series. We're just about done with Season 2 of Batman Beyond. We did a Patreon episode talking about The Flash. And if you happen to be in a comic book store at this point while you're listening to this, I have a comic out right now called Batman White Knight Presents Generation Joker, which should be the third issue, should be out right now. So yeah, pick it up. Be much obliged.
Thanks everybody for listening. We'll be back with the first episode of the third season of Deadwood. It's called Tell Your God to Ready for Blood. See you next week.
May I say to you that the week since our meeting has seen me conduct with Yankton an active telegraphic correspondence, which on every count has ameliorated the terms of the proposal before you in favor of the Deadwood camp.
You smell like cat piss.
I have worked so hard and diligently for you, Mr. Swearingen, that well may be the case. Regardless of the outcome, I am proud of that advocacy.
Having said that, you liable to say more?
Let the document now speak for itself. The letters may get larger. The numbers will not. Forgive me. Long hours, giddy at the smell of the barn. Stoic composure. The next sound you hear will be that of your own voice.
Get the fuck out of here. You'll know when I've come to an answer.
I must tell you, I require a response within the hour. Or as soon as humanly possible.